Good morning, sir. You are
Good morning.
live on the
How you doing?
internet. Hello.
Wow. Thank you so much. This is the first time I've been on the internet. Nice to meet you.
You know what? When you had the look on your face like this might have been the first time you're on the internet. So welcome. We'll be your guides. Actually, you have to be our guides because we are very intrigued by this sort of vision that you have here, and I want to make sure that we lay the groundwork properly so we can get off into some a bit more of the esoteric stuff that I'm sure we will get pulled into. So, can you just give the TLDR on what Arkhai is and sort of the opportunity you're running at?
Yeah. So basically, our thesis is that most commerce in the future is going to be driven by autonomous agents. This is a super common narrative now at this point. And we are building a way for these agents to exchange anything for anything else. Now, I basically started out designing distributed computing marketplaces. And then in the process of trying to make the best one possible, I began to see that, there are these patterns across different kinds of marketplaces that can kind of be abstracted, right? So like participants in marketplaces need to be able to discover each other. They need to be able to negotiate a price. They need to be able to settle somehow. There needs to be some kind of arbitration process if there's a disagreement, right? That's regardless if you're buying, compute, storage, bandwidth, energy, information, real world assets, Git commits, anything, right? You can, there are pieces of this that can be abstracted, and you can basically create like boilerplates for like creating different kinds of marketplaces that can save like whatever 80% of the time required to create any particular kind of marketplace, and so that your specific kind of marketplace only requires that additional 20%, right? So you can kind of like save a bunch of time if you have this kind of underlying boilerplate code, right? And so that's like the kind of like foundation of what Arkhai is building, right? And then that requires a few different components, right? So the first is, so let's go, I'll skip to let's go over the four stages again, right? So there's discovery, there's negotiation, there's settlement, and there's arbitration. So I'll go with settlement and arbitration real quick. So those are on chain for us. And the way those work is that we basically created an escrow and arbitration system, where basically you put money into escrow, something happens, and then the money moves out. And then that something happens can be, any kind of off-chain event, and it's triggered, or on-chain event, and it's triggered by a Boolean expression, like, if A and B or not C and D. Like if, I get this job done within this time period and it's true, and, something else, then, the escrow is released to the person who did the computation. Otherwise, it goes back to the buyer, right? But A, B, C, and D, each of those variables can be arbitrated, whether or not they occurred, and each of those arbitrators can be arbitrated, right? And so you can do this kind of recursive arbitration and start composing these really cool like smart contracts, right? So that you can kind of express many different kinds of marketplaces.
Before we
So
get
that's how
too much further in,
yeah,
can we maybe just talk about, like, give us some sort of concrete example here to anchor us as we walk through these examples? Because I think you talk about data silos and sort of limitations of a lot of these marketplaces right now. But I think for most of us, it's probably still a big leap for us even to think that an AI is going to go out and do procurement and negotiation, et cetera. So what is a good example of a market that might make that real for us?
So really good example is the compute marketplace.
Okay.
And the reason is, and you're right, actually, there is a lot of skepticism and hesitation around having an AI agent buy stuff for you. They're really, truly, they're not being even used that much, right? So we had that big announcement from Stripe and OpenAI, I think a few months ago, and I think there's some other big companies that are working on it. We have in the open source world, X402 is popular. But the reality is that there isn't much real world usage around this, and that's because people don't trust these, just agents to be doing these things for you yet. The world of compute is a bit different, right? And the reason being that you can set up, it's a much more restricted environment, and you can set up guardrails much more easily for buying and selling compute between autonomous agents, right? If I'm buying like an H100 node in some data center or a rack, or even like just a Docker job if it's small, every single thing about that can be easily quantified. How much CPU, how much GPU, how much RAM, how long, etc. Everything's like really, really like mathematically definable, and that makes things a lot easier to kind of price properly and to make people feel like they're safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is the opportunity you're going after kind of being the middleware or building the platforms or building the agents? Like where's the big opportunity you see?
Yeah, so basically right now we're doing a full vertical integration on this stack, right? So going back to the escrow and arbitration stuff, so that was like the settlement and arbitration. Those are the last two steps of that process, right? So that we have that's public, that's on GitHub. Then we have the first two, which are discovery and negotiation. So we are building those right now. We're in beta mode. We're in beta. So if you're interested in joining the pilot, please go to our website and sign up on the contact form. And then, so for the negotiation specifically, we're building agents right now that will take a look at your like data center. If you, let's say you're a data center operator, you have a bunch of H100 nodes or A100 nodes or P200s or whatever they are, and then you might have some kind of you need to pull in energy from the grid. You need to buy energy from the grid in order to run these computations, or you might have some behind the meter generation. You might have like a gas generator or some solar panels or some windmills or whatever, and you might have some batteries, some energy storage batteries that are behind the meter as well, right? And so now you have this really interesting load balancing problem of like, okay, do I take this computation and then either buy the energy or use my own energy, or maybe like, do I not take that computation and then maybe like sell, resell it to someone else and then sell my excess energy to the grid, right? There's all these like kind of load balancing questions which are really interesting, and so we are training autonomous agents to do that on people's behalves, right? And so basically, yeah. So just going back from the just building out the vision. So this kind of lowest layer, there's like this this kind of boilerplate code they can use to create any kind of marketplace you want from basic building blocks. Then we have these settlement and arbitration smart contracts, and then we have these autonomous agents that we're trading to buy and sell compute and energy specifically. We also information. We also, I think I have storage in there, like data storage, and then, on top of all of that, we have, so we just released yesterday, I'll actually go into this. So we released a marketplace for Git commits. So it's basically like an automated bounty system. And so, you basically define a suite of tests that, you want some commit to pass. And if somebody submits code that passes that test, then they automatically get the money that was in the escrow. And that's using our escrow and arbitration system, right? So like the arbiters will go and check, does every test pass? We have to sandbox things in Docker containers and so on and so forth. But that's basically how that works. So we use our escrow contracts to create this marketplace for Git commits. We're also using the escrow contracts for the compute and store compute and energy trading, right? And then once we have that foundation, and then hold on, one more thing before I get to the final thing. So then we have this
fucking diagram.
Yeah, we will. We have diagrams, and we'll have so many diagrams. You'll have so many diagrams. You'll get sick of diagrams. And then and then so what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be releasing this tomorrow, hopefully, is we're going to have the we're going to use the Git commit marketplace to have the agents that are trading energy and compute improve themselves, right? Basically, right? Or that either us improve them or them improve themselves, right? So this Git commit marketplace is a foundation for recursively self-improving agents, right? That can pay for their own improvement. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I'm. So I think if people want to sort of see the totality, they should go to your website, because I think you're talking about a lot of different pieces here. I guess the interesting question for me is this, do you see this as like a platform opportunity, or is the real opportunity here to be much more of a specific solution? Because I think in your example here, sort of the procurement of energy and compute and sort of this multiple variables that have big optimization problems that are being run constantly seems like a pretty big opportunity from a problem and sort of potential business outcome perspective. And also that there, from a buyer there, I'm probably looking for the best agent or the best platform for my fairly specific, or at least that I feel like is a fairly specific or unique use case. So are you running at the general platform opportunity, or do you think you're going to get pulled down into maybe the highest value opportunity that's in the near term?
That's a great question. So basically, my personal belief is that the more marketplaces we have, the better off the more opportunities everybody has to build these things, right? So just by way of example, the rage is a bit over, but back in especially 2024, there's so many DePIN networks raised for these compute marketplaces, right? So this is like this is not the new thing. and they all just kept on building the same infrastructure over and over and over. And there was like no point. There was really like there weren't any differentiating factors. There wasn't any like secret sauce in any of these architectures. And so you just had these teams that were spending individually each millions and millions of dollars on creating, distributed computing marketplaces that could have saved a ton of time and money if there was just some kind of provider that they could go to and be like, oh, like here are all of these modular marketplace primitives that you can use to create any kind of marketplace you want from basic building blocks, which is what we're building. So if you want a compute marketplace, here's a compute marketplace. If you want a storage marketplace, here's a storage marketplace, right? And so that's one big segment. It's like, where are all the, and I know people are still building distributed computing marketplaces, to be clear, like that's still happening. And so so that's one big target market, which is like, hey, we can save you a ton of time and money on building that marketplace because we just have like this boilerplate stuff, right? So that's one big market opportunity for us. Separately from that, there is of course building our own compute marketplace, right? And so I can jump into that because that was like the final thing I wanted to discuss. But those are like the two angles, and they're not really contradictory because like anything we do to make our own compute marketplace better is something we can use to help other people as well.
I'm interested in once you have like the marketplace infrastructure built, how hard it is to train these agents, or get these agents up that understand their specific use case or vertical they're operating in.
So that depends on the specific marketplace. And so, for example, a simulation for a storage marketplace would look a lot different than a simulation for a compute marketplace. This is an interesting question insofar as like in our simulation now, like for example, you can turn off like energy, like trading, like storage and generation, and like the simulation still works. The agents will simply train under the constraints where they're not able to like generate or store energy, right? They can only really buy or sell from the grid, and the simulation still works. And that simulation also has storage, like of data storage. It's TBD whether we can use the same simulation and just like really in an extremely modular manner, choose only the variables we want. Like, okay, there's actually no compute. That's right. There's no GPUs here. We have some CPUs and a bunch of storage space if we're talking about a storage marketplace, or we have like a ton of connection if we're talking about a bandwidth marketplace, and we're talking about lots of energy. We're talking about an energy marketplace. So it's TBD whether we can reuse the same simulation for those scenarios or whether we need to write a brand new one from scratch.
Okay, we have to let you go, but I have maybe one last question here before we do that. I am interested in getting a sense of like how fast we get to this world where we're actually having agents buy stuff for us. Like what needs to change? What's the big blocker there? Is this something that is just around the corner, or do we see a lot more tech build out required? Maybe it's not even the tech build out that's a limitation.
I get asked this question quite a bit, which is we definitely have not yet experienced like a ChatGPT moment for AI agents buying and selling stuff for us, right? In my opinion, the primary reason for that is that there's just still a lot of uncertainty and hesitation or FUD around even just language models in general, like ChatGPT, AI. There are people who just don't even want to use them at all anymore still, right? And that kind of, if they don't even want to use that, they're certainly not going to be having like an agent go and buy and sell stuff for them in the beginning, right? So there's a few factors here. One is, I think that if people build systems, and it's not particularly hard, but okay, that agent goes out and looks for the thing to buy for you, but it'll ask you first. It'll ask you for your permission first, whether or not you actually want that thing to be bought. That is one method that, like, for sure, I think it's going to work. I think Google's AP2 is kind of structured like that. And then the other factor is, it really depends on the particular kind of marketplace. So there's a big difference between asking an agent to go out and buy something for you, like on Amazon or whatever, where it's like, okay, you might want to be really particular about the thing that you have in your home or that you're wearing or whatever, versus like a relatively highly repeated process like buying and selling compute, right? Which is like, the same hardware in the same location, you're just selling it over and over and over. And there's no really point in like manually pricing it, because an agent's going to do it better than you anyways. And so there's guardrails around the what the agents can do. And there's a lot of people focusing on guardrails for agents. There isn't that much focus on guardrails for the actual marketplaces themselves, and I think that's where we're really different in that. So we can define actual marketplaces, and that actually changes the dynamics a lot.
I mean, people, if you ever run advertising on Google or Facebook, you've essentially had an agent make buying decisions for you. You just haven't been deeply involved in it. So seeing that be brought to other similar digital, complex marketplaces makes a ton of sense. All right, I knew we weren't going to have enough time to get into all the details here. I feel like we're still leaving a bunch on the table here, but people should go check out your website. You do have a market up for Git commits, which I think is interesting, and people can go, I think, participate in. But I think we should have you back on in a few months just to see where you get to, because I feel like this is the type of thing that is just going to be very tangible as soon as you can actually make it very tangible. And it's also, I think the markets here are probably, not consumer focused first, and actually have a ton of dollar value behind them, which makes it very interesting, but also probably slightly more complex to actually bring to market. So lots to check up on. Levi, I appreciate you hopping on with us today. I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'd love to come back on. We're certainly in a few months, things are going to look very, very, very different.
I can
a lot to show. Yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah. All right, brother. Thanks so much.
Peace, man.